This episode is brought to you by Sable International, building futures beyond borders.
Welcome to the Relocated South African, the podcast that explores the journeys of South Africans building lives and careers around the world. I'm your host, Jan Hugo, speaking to you as always from Lagos in Portugal. Today is a really interesting episode because it's not just about leaving South Africa, it's also about returning. So my guest today is Monty Stephenson, now living in Cape Town. Welcome, Monty. It's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. Really appreciate the opportunity to share my story. Actually, our story. It's my family's story.
Absolutely. So, Monty, I always start the episode with just a question like, where you from, where do you study, and how did you get to leave South Africa?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to start by going in reverse order in terms of where I was born. So it's currently called Makanda. I grew up knowing the isiXhosa name as Ichini, and it's actually Grahamstown is sitting on my ID document. So yeah, I grew up in the Eastern Cape. Unfortunately, only in the Eastern Cape for about 5 years. Grandmother on my mother's side, my maternal grandmother, sadly got killed in a car accident, and so my mum said to my dad, who had been a farmer all his life, unfortunately, we've got to move back, or not move back, but move to Plettenberg Bay, where my grandmother and my mum had grown up. So, yeah, hell of a fortunate to grow up in Plettenberg Bay, actually outside of Plet on a small farm. My dad became a small farmer, if I could use that term. Grew up in Plet, Knysna, spent a year in Cape Town after my dad passed on, and that year I thought was going to be at least 3 years at Rondebosch Boys Eye, and then my stepdad said no, he'd like to move back to Plet. So we moved back to Plet, and then from Plet it was up to Johannesburg. I had to go and see the concrete jungle. So I was at university at Wits, absolutely loved it. BCom honors, and did my articles, became a chartered accountant. My initial vocation was actually to become a sports broadcaster. But my stepdad at the time said, you're very good in accounting and maths. And at that point in time, sadly, South Africa was still under apartheid. And he said, look, your opportunities within sports broadcasting are going to be fairly limited, whereas within the accounting profession, you can at least earn a living. So I took his sage advice. I've never given up on the sports broadcasting side. I mean, I'm an avid sports guy. But having said that, to get back to your original question, it's out of being with Deloitte in Johannesburg. I got married 2 years earlier to my wife, Cathy, and she's an occupational therapist. And being young South Africans back in the day, in the 90s, young South Africans were keen to go and travel and work overseas. Unfortunately, I was at a senior level with Deloitte already, and they weren't keen to promote or sponsor me going overseas. So instead, I had to do my own thing. I contacted Deloitte in Canada, and that's a long story as well. But literally a night later, Friday night, I got a call from them. They said, we've got an opportunity for you in Canada. And Cathy and I hopped on a plane in March 1996 and arrived in the very cold Prince George, a northern winter city in British Columbia in Canada, to shock and horror. I remember us phoning her parents that evening from a very dark-looking motel. Not dark because of the winter conditions, just dark and dingy inside. And just said to them, we're on the next plane home. All our dreams are being shattered. And yet we stayed there well beyond the 2 years.
Oh, wow,
so there was something more to it. Yeah.
No, we're gonna delve a little deeper. And your wife, was she able to work as an occupational therapist?
Yeah, interesting story. So in preparing to go over We had been offered or I'd been offered my contract, I think around July 1995. So it still took a good, about 7 months to get over to Canada. Part of it was the whole process of having to get, the medicals. I think my understanding is still very similar. It's done in Nairobi, out of Nairobi, Kenya. Not that we had to fly there. Some doctor in Johannesburg was designated, did all the requirements and then sent it off. And I think we were informed around November that we can get a visa. And then the challenge was, because I was a senior manager with Deloitte, I had a fairly large portfolio, and I needed to hand that portfolio over to the manager who was going to take over from me. So there was a bit of a process there. I think we were meant to go a little bit earlier, if I recollect. We had a look at Cathy's situation. It was outstanding. I mean, Deloitte's in Canada said, occupational therapy, it's number one requirement in Canada. Your wife will get a job, no problem. So did Deloitte's in Prince George. They mentioned the same, or made the same comment. We arrived in Prince George with the expectation that she'd be able to get a job almost immediately. Every week, every day, every week, every month went by, and she couldn't get a job. And it was hell of a challenging, because she was now sitting at home in a foreign country. I was at work. It was initially winter conditions. We needed to get used to driving in snow on icy roads, on the wrong side of the road. So far away from family. Prince George to Cape Town is probably the longest route you can fly. You could probably fly from Anchorage to Cape Town, and it's longer, but it's possibly one of the longest routes that a South African or expatriate would have to fly to get home. And so we even went down to Vancouver in the summer. First time we were down in Vancouver since when we arrived. We landed there and then flew up to Prince George. But first time to go and explore Vancouver, I think it was around June, July. She was required to do a conversion exam, so to become a Canadian OT. In my case, I didn't have to do it initially. And so she did the exam. I remember trying conditions. We ended up staying at a campsite in a tent at Vancouver Airport, of all places, or next to Vancouver Airport. You just got these planes taking off over you, making, absolute loud noise, and you can't sleep. Anyway, she went and wrote the exam, successfully passed that. And we just got to a point where we started looking around, and there was an opportunity for her in Saskatoon, in Saskatchewan, in the Midlands of Canada. And I had a look there was a Deloitte's office there, and I went to my bosses at Deloitte's in Prince George, and I said, look, sorry guys, when we signed up, both of us signed up to come and gain work experience in Canada and enjoy what Canada has to offer and explore it. Do you mind us moving to Saskatoon? There's an opportunity for Cathy, and, what are your thoughts? Well, the next day she had a job in Prince George. I found out subsequently, and she relates the story differently. We had already met her boss before hand. She had got to know many of the occupational therapists in town. We'd actually become very good friends with two of them and their husbands, and the one couple today are still our best friends, Ken and Sherry Mitchell. So she knew everyone within the OT space, but just didn't have a job. And she survived that time period through volunteerism. And that's one of the strengths of Canada. It's known for its volunteerism. You actually even, if you got a job, you're still required to volunteer. And I think it's a brilliant thing. I mean, when I say you're required, it's by choice. It's not forced, but it's a culture. And the reason she got that job, this is my take on it. If she was sitting next to me, she would give you a very different reason. My boss was known as Mr. Deloitte's in Prince George. Very charismatic, Brent Campbell, very charismatic person. I learned a lot from him. And he was close to completing his tenure at Deloitte. He was a few years away from retirement. So you can picture the age. And Cathy's boss, and I'm trying to remember her name now, but Brent literally lived 2 doors away. So was the neighbor of his neighbor. And my understanding is Brent, he was persuasive as anything. He walked 2 doors down and he said to her, he said, "You will hire this lady because we'd like to retain this guy." That's the story I got told by Brent. But
That's a
Cathy maintains
beautiful story.
It's different.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
And, that just showed me the strength of Canadians as well. They're some of the most caring and people. And probably further on in our discussion, I'll share more around Canadians because we really came to appreciate them a lot. Initially, when we arrived, you have that expectation as South Africans. For example, Jan, if you came back to Cape Town, you and I will connect and we'll go for a coffee, a lunch, or whatever, dinner. That's the way we are. We love caring song. In Canada, when we arrived, it's like, oh, okay, South Africa. There's no sort of big thing about you. Sure, you're from South Africa, so what? But what they really appreciate of individuals is who you are, what you represent in life. And as soon as they connect with that, you're a friend forever. Yeah.
I think that's amazing. I think probably in 96 when you got there, they didn't have all the Facebook groups and all the, these days there's South Africans connecting with South Africans in every town. So for a lot of people, it's a soft landing. You guys went across just for work experience for a 2-year period. When did that become 10?
Yeah, good question. So the initial year and a half for me was tough. I'd come from a senior manager role. In Canada, there was nothing at the time called senior manager at Deloitte. It was manager. And the manager role felt like junior manager. And when I arrived, a fellow South African, and it was actually through him, Wayne Poolman, that the opportunity arose. Wayne and I were, if you remember, in Joburg, it's still there, the Balalaika Hotel, still in the middle of Sandton. We were there for a goodbye. It might have even been his. He had just finished articles. He had worked on one of my jobs. And so we were saying, having a typical South African thing back in the day, or CA thing, from 12 o'clock, and it just carries on. He said he's off to Canada. So I said, where in Canada? He said, yeah, it's a place called Prince George. And I actually got the details of the Canadian HR leader, Deloitte's leader, from him, contacted her in Toronto. And as I said, I got a response a night later to say, we've got the job for you. So Wayne arrived a month before us. Okay. My initial, initial sort of starting point with Deloitte in Prince George was to work under Wayne. So I was about 4 or 5 years the senior of Wayne, and the first job I was doing, I was actually working for him. And it was hell of a funny because Wayne, and I'm sure Wayne won't mind me saying this, but Wayne back in Deloitte Johannesburg, it's highly competitive. It's made up of a lot of top performers, and he certainly wasn't one of those. The interesting aspect, he had an 18-month contract, if I recollect, and when he finished his 18 months, they absolutely loved him, and I saw it. Him and I worked together quite a bit. He was a top performer. That's the one great thing about South Africans. You take us out of the country, and we are hard workers. We committed, intelligent, etc. So that's people, and I remember back in the day, they wanted South Africans to come and work for them in Canada. Yeah, the first 15 to 18 months were difficult. They wouldn't provide me with a senior manager or higher role they said, look, we can see you at that level, but we hired a manager, and unfortunately we mistook your experience and they saw it with Wayne as well. But if you commit to us, then things will change. And Cathy and I, towards the end of that contract, decided that we'd already decided before we went over to Canada that we were going to start a family once we came back. And that was going to be like 5 years into our marriage. And so we just looked at each other, Cathy and I said, Canada is the ideal place to bring up kids, and especially where we lived in Prince George. Let's commit longer. Let our kids be born here, and let's consider getting a Canadian passport ourselves, not for convenience, but for long term. So once we had committed to Canada, I got promoted to senior manager. I started fulfilling, the role of almost a partner or director. The opportunities were significant. I then, a year or two later, committed to actually doing the CA conversion. So I'm a Canadian chartered accountant as well. But yeah, that commitment became quite easy. We never left.
Okay, sorry.
South Africa to immigrate. We left to go and experience a different culture. And you spoke earlier about South Africans.
When I moved to Portugal, I had no idea how much paperwork was involved. Police clearances, apostille certificates, unabridged documents. It can feel overwhelming. Apostille takes care of it all for you. They apply, follow up, and courier everything directly to your door, whether you are still in South Africa or already settled abroad. Click the link in the description below and let Apostille take it from there.
Connecting with South Africans overseas. We came across so many South Africans. Again, I've got a few funny stories. You hear the accent or the Afrikaans accent, even the English accent or Indian or isiXhosa accent. You can hear these accents. So we connected with South Africans, and two of our best friends are still ex-South Africans from Bloemfontein, and our husband's ex-UK, born in the UK, but also Bloem and Pietermaritzburg. And we see them every year. They come out to Cape Town. We try to connect with Canadians. We wanted to, we were there to experience a different culture, not to do the when we route and to experience South Africa. We were always had in mind to come back after 2 years. So we're going to come and braai when we got back.
But that's a very interesting way of looking at it, because a lot of my guests are, you decide you're going to go for an opportunity, or kids leave like us and we decide to go. But in your case, it kind of mid-story that you decided you're gonna now stay. And I mean, that just raises questions like, what about family back home? How did they react to that? People were thinking you were coming back. When you left, did you sell up? Did you completely leave initially? Or, how did that process work? Because I think a lot of people struggle sometimes with those questions.
Yeah, it's quite important questions that you're raising. So initially when we left, we had a townhouse in Johannesburg. So we initially were going to retain that. And my youngest sister, who's older than me, I'm the youngest of 5 kids in my family. My youngest sister, we had in mind for her to actually look after the place for us over the 2-year period. But just before I think we left for Canada, she decided to make a move to Cape Town. So that option was no longer there. We had 2 cats at the time, and we thought, and then I think one of them got killed, so we had a cat, and we thought, she could look after the cat by the time we come home. At least our cat's still here. We'll still have the townhouse. I think what made it easier then to stay in Canada is, with my sister moving to Cape Town, we made a very last-minute decision to actually sell the townhouse. I was quite nervous that I was going to be left with still something owing on the mortgage, because we had owned that townhouse for about 2 years most. Sold it and actually made some money from that, which helped us in our move to Canada. The cats. So initially I'd budgeted to pay for everything for us to travel to Canada. So the whole move. We took all our goods and stored them with my one brother, my youngest brother, also in Johannesburg. So they were going to be, the goods would be there for 2 years later when we get back, all our furniture, etc. And the cats, because all our other costs, our flights, etc., were paid for by Deloitte, we had some extra cash. So we decided to actually take the cats over to Canada. It's one of the few countries at the time that you could take a cat that didn't have to be in quarantine. So actually, it was 2 cats, not 1 cat, because we had replaced the cat that had been killed. So the 2 cats got to travel to Canada via a cat hotel in Amsterdam, arrived in Vancouver, must have sat there in the cold as well for a while, and then the flight up to Prince George. And we think by the time that flight took place, the sedatives had worn off. And they keep the cats sort of in a lower area close to the engines, and that impacted those cats for the rest of their lives. Just that experience, it was, you could see they were traumatized by it. But anyway, so to sell up, we had sold up. That made it easier to then make the decision to stay in Canada.
Okay.
And once we made the decision, I gave my boot a shout in Joburg, and I said, can you please get our stuff in a container, which was, if I recollect, paid for by Deloitte. They were happy to pay for that, in a container, and it was sent across to us. So all our stuff from Joburg ended up in Prince George. Yeah, that decision became quite easy to make.
Wow.
The family, I must be honest, I've never asked them how they felt. My mom, because my dad had long passed on, and my stepdad had passed on as well. I think my mom was a little bit hit up, by us living so far away. But before we made the decision to stay, she actually came across to Canada, her first major overseas trip. And I think her having seen where we lived and the tranquility and the peace and just the absolute beauty of, that area and the friends we'd made must have given her a level of peace. The rest of my siblings, I've actually never asked her. It's a good question, and I will.
No, it's, this family thing, Monty, comes out in every conversation, is that, leaving parents behind, it's very difficult. And people don't realize how parents suffer because they don't want to tell you. They don't want to tell the kids how bad it is for them.
Maybe tied to that, Jan. I mean, Cathy and I have now gone through that same experience. Our eldest daughter has spent 3 times overseas. And the initial time was a gap year straight out of school in London. And initially it was difficult. And I remember Cathy and I saying to each other, we now know what it feels like, for what it felt like for her parents more so. Her parents by then had passed on. My mom was still alive at the time. She only passed on 2 years ago. And so we just said to each other, we now fully understand the pain that we created for our parents. When you're young, it is pretty much about you. It's about exploring, adventurism. But as a parent, I still sit here. I'm close to 60 now. Our 3 daughters are in their early to late 20s. And I still worry about each of them. That worry never goes away. So I can imagine for Cathy's parents was that worry. For my mom, she stayed with my youngest brother and his wife. So there was more connection to a family member. For Cathy's parents, their eldest son, and he's still in the UK, Andy. So Andy and his wife and daughter had immigrated to the UK, and their middle child or youngest son, Lawrence, and his wife, Marilyn, and their 2 kids were in Johannesburg, and they were down in Mossel Bay. So for them, it must have been lonely. And you're probably going to come to the question, but that's what led us back to South Africa.
Okay, well, yeah.
Our kids are still very young. They were between the age of 3, they were 3, 5, and 8. That we think it's time to bring them back because, Granny and Grandpa and Omar are close to possibly passing on, and we need to give the kids and the grandparents an opportunity to really connect.
Okay,
But
because
I'll share more on that story.
Okay, I'm going to get to that because I was going to ask you, with your kids being born in Canada, obviously their early recollection would be Canadian and they saw themselves probably as Canadian. How gradual did it change that they became South African after you came back? And you've kind of answered the question why you came back for the family, but for them, how do they identify today? They in their 20s.
Yeah, it's they South African.
Okay. With
Very
Canadian
interesting
passports.
aspect when we became Canadian, Cathy and I became Canadian citizens. Very, very proud occasion. I'm still proudly Canadian. That's or South African Canadian or Canadian South African. I don't know what I am. When we became Canadian, our South African citizenship got stripped of us. We applied a year before we got Canadian citizenship to apply for a second citizenship. And the South African authorities at the time took their time and we got our citizenship. And literally a few days later, we finally got a letter from the consulate in Ottawa to say, that's it, your citizenship has been stripped of you. Sorry, no, a request to fill out another form. And on it, it said, have you got citizenship of another country? And Cathy and I are deeply committed Christians. And the last thing I'm going to do is not say what's the truth. So we actually noted, we're Canadian citizens. And literally a few days later, I mean, it had taken them a year to respond. A few days later, we got a letter to say you're officially no longer South African citizens. Your passport's taken away. If I remember, we had to send it to them. And so that was it. We were Canadians going forward. Our kids, when we came back in 2006, we had registered our eldest daughter, Tessa's birth with the South African authorities because that happened before we became Canadian citizens. And I think we had registered the middle one as well, or we possibly hadn't. And we had to quite urgently register one of them, possibly the youngest one, or possibly both of them, literally a few months before coming back to South Africa, because that's another story, why we came back and the urgency of that. And there was a very kind lady in the Ottawa consulate who got it through. I still don't know how she did it, and I trust it was all above board. And so our kids returned as South African passport holders and Canadians. So they were South African citizens and Canadian citizens. Cathy and I were Canadian citizens, yet we were born in South Africa and no South African citizenship. Jan, we literally got our South African citizenship back about 2 months ago through the whole process, which is now one of the political parties here took the government to court and said this is illegal, and the courts actually confirmed that. And can I tell you, getting my South African citizenship back 2 months ago, the process to get it back took half an hour. It's the most efficient process through Home Affairs I've ever seen, ever seen. Kudos to them. Electronic, biometrics, picture of myself, it's, in the avocado shape, and the process was simple. Literally 2 weeks later, your citizenship has been reinstated. Same for Cathy. So we proudly now are South African citizens again. We can vote, which I think is an honor. When we were in Canada, I voted in every election. It's a privilege to vote. The last 20 years we've been back in South Africa, it's been difficult to sit here and not vote. Not that my vote would make a huge difference, but it will. That's the way I see it. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. But, thinking back to this decision, obviously you must have had a conflict because on the one hand, by then you must have been close to partner if you stayed with Deloitte after 10 years, or maybe you were partner. And high up in a career, giving that up and making that call to go back, how difficult was that?
Very difficult. So I was meant to be a partner literally 6 months after we left. So in Prince George, it was a small office. When I arrived, 7 partners. In today's world of big 4 audit firms, that partnership has now become a local Canadian partnership, so no longer Deloitte's. But by the time I left, it was down to a 2-partner practice. And the partner I worked closely with was retiring 6 months after I left. And so a very difficult decision. When I went to go and first mention to him that we were returning to South Africa, I mean, I just broke down in tears because it was difficult to tell people who are considered some of my best friends. I mean, and it was a 50-person practice. By that time, I think we were down to 4 partners. I just, I felt I was letting the team down.
Mm.
They were amazing. They initially said, look, we understand your wish to go back to South Africa, but we want to keep you. And so, and because you mentioned that the reason you're going back is because of your elderly parents, we'll pay for them to come to Canada and we'll cover their medical costs. Because those were 2 requirements. If you bring your parents over, you've got to cover the medical costs. So we spoke to our parents, and my mom was keen to come. And then one of Cathy's parents didn't like the cold, even though over the 10 years we were there, they had visited about 5 or 6 times, and my mom had been over 3 times. They were in a very nice retirement village in Mossel Bay, and they had friends. And moving at their age, which was late 60s, would have been difficult for them. Late 60s, maybe, late 60s, close to 70. So the next thing, so I said, unfortunately, parents won't come over. They then offered, it's an amazing offer. Whenever I share the story, I find it hard to believe that that this was the reality. They said, Monty, you and your family, 5 of you, can go to South Africa every year in December for 4 weeks. We'll pay for the whole trip until you tell us you no longer want to go. And I mean, I've never heard a story similar. And don't ask, well, I know why we didn't accept it. But we look back over the last 20 years because we've been extremely happy in Cape Town. It was bittersweet to come back to Cape Town. I mean, we didn't leave South Africa angry. We actually left to go and explore the world, fell in love with a country and an area that we absolutely loved. But we still loved South Africa. We were committed South Africans. Obviously, when we became Canadian citizens, we were committed Canadians as well. But we do look back and we say, why didn't we take that up? Because we could have had the best of both worlds. But there was a reason we didn't take it up.
Sure.
And even then post that, the expectation, I'd said to them, I do believe we'll be back in 2 years' time. And over the next 2 years, I got asked several times, hop on the plane, direct partner entry, can you be here to replace John Patterson I'd worked closely with. He's retired now and we need you to come and take over. And then up until 5 years after we had left, the managing partner, Ron Fechner, he was the one who had contacted me. So he said, Monty, I'm finally retiring and we need you back. Can you hop on a plane to Toronto, direct partner entry? And the objective always was that I'd become a partner. I'd obviously grow in that. But there'd be 2 of us left, and the other partner had said they didn't want to be the managing partner. And I've always enjoyed leadership. So that was also the objective for me to lead that practice, which, you give that up, it's a lot. But can I tell you, we gained a lot coming back to South Africa. The family aspect, sure, life has treated us in strange ways, and in Canada, life was pretty easy. My stress levels were 0.5%. But I have no regrets, absolutely no regrets. And you asked something about my kids being Canadian. Their accents are still the 2 eldest have still got a very Canadian link to it. I mean, they get asked often, my eldest daughter, where are you from? And she says, I'm South African. And no, you got some other accent. She says, well, I'm Canadian born. But they identify themselves more as South African. They've been here way longer. The youngest one can't remember Canada, and the two middle ones remember events with their friends in Prince George. So, yeah.
I mean, and again, just thinking of the return, when you came back, did you have work in South Africa, or
Yes.
how did that process work?
Okay, so that's part of the story why we came back, because we had no plans to come back. Not because we were angry at South Africa. Every 3 years we'd come out to South Africa on holiday, and we came out in December 2005. We were in Johannesburg before coming down to Cape Town for a few days to see my younger sister here, and then on to Mossel Bay to spend time with Cathy's parents, and Plettenberg Bay with my mom. And so I was up in Joburg with all our other, Cathy's one sibling and my 3 siblings who lived up there, and their families. And on the last day of our trip in Johannesburg, my brother-in-law, Pete, who I really get on well with, had organized an interview, unbeknown to me, with Ernst Young in Johannesburg. And so he phoned me. He said, Monty, I've got an interview with you for you tomorrow. I'd like you to go and take it in at Ernst Young. Like, Pete, we're not planning on coming back here. No, I'd like you to go. And I have a deep respect for Pete. And so I decided, no, I'll take it in, even though I'd prefer to be on holiday. And I took in that interview. And you can imagine, I was so relaxed because I have no plans. I didn't put in a CV or anything. I mean, they see nothing about me. And the fortuitous thing is that Ernst Young were on a overseas recruitment. They were trying to recruit South Africans back to South Africa. They were number 4 business at that time, sized big 4 business. And they had ambitions to become number 3 and possibly number 2. And so they were on this drive to bring back mostly ex-Ernst Young individuals who were working overseas. So when I went for the interview, an hour later, I had a job in Johannesburg, and I said to the interviewers, I said, or the partners I was interviewed by, I said, we have no. I just want to be honest. We have no plans coming back. This is my brother-in-law, who they knew well. It was his audit partner who he had contacted and said, please interview my brother-in-law. And I said, if we do come back, it's Cape Town. And so they said, well, we can organize an interview in Cape Town. So when are you in Cape Town? We said, we're in Cape Town tomorrow. So the next day I had another interview. I remember parking at the waterfront. I didn't know where Ernst Young office was. It was actually in Lower Berg Street. And parked at the waterfront thinking, we didn't have cell phones in those days. Canada back in 2006, there was no purpose for a cell phone. So I didn't know how far the walk was. It felt like it took me an hour to get to the Ernst Young offices. And by that time, it was piping hot. I mean, it was December. I arrived there, I'm probably as sweaty as anything. And I meet with the managing partner, James Newlands, and his HR partner. And an hour later, I've got a job in Cape Town. So now I'm like, cool. Then I said to them, actually, if we do come back, I said the same thing. We're not planning on coming back. But if we do, it's going to be George. Now, Prince George to George made sense to us. And so he said, I'll organize an interview for you in George. So when we arrived in Mossel Bay, we were just tired of this thing. We said, we want 2 weeks of holiday. Don't need more interviews. And I disrespectfully didn't take in the interview in Port Elizabeth. Later, so I'll come back to the Ernst Young story because it's a one I enjoy sharing. But later, once we'd returned to South Africa and I was with Ernst Young, I was expecting to become a partner within short time period. And unfortunately, situations happened that just, I went for partner assessment, managing partner changed, and he had different objectives. But he said to me, Monty, I can position you in Port Elizabeth or Quebec now. They've got an opportunity, Ernst Young. They're looking for someone, and I think you're the ideal person. And Reza and I flew to to Port Elizabeth or Quebec, and I went and met with his surname is Biggs, hell of a nice guy. And I thought, man, Port Elizabeth is the ideal place to end up in. And interestingly, the other person I interviewed with was the George partner. So I did eventually have that interview, and they both wanted me to join Port Elizabeth. And my wife and I looked at each other and said, when we came back to Cape Town. So as much as I would have loved to move back to the Eastern Cape, we just said timing's not right, young kids. But to come back to the Ernst Young story, James Newlands, the managing partner in Cape Town, said, we'll give you 3 months to make a decision, which, as you and I know, you never give someone more than a day to make a decision. If you want them, you say, you've got a day. And if he had done that, we probably would have said yes. He gave us 3 months, and Cathy and I returned to Prince George. Yeah, we were mulling over this because we had never planned to come back. And we prayed about it, and we literally took up until the week before our time was meant to run out. And James gave me a call. And he said to me, Monty, sorry, I know there's still a week left, but we're in the process of hiring someone else if you can't make it. We have someone who can replace you. And I said to him, you won't believe this, James, but half an hour ago, Cathy and I just felt, we just felt a God-given passage, and it was exactly the same one. And it said, whether you this side of the seas or that side of the seas, I will be with you wherever you are. And we said we just felt in our spirit that this was the right thing for us. And you won't believe it, we've made a decision. We are coming back. And that's how we ended up back in Cape Town. So yeah,
fantastic.
Absolutely
Beautiful.
Fortunate. As I said, I've never regretted it.
Oh, that's amazing. And Monty, when you came back, was it hard to reintegrate in South Africa, or did you not find it hard at all?
No, we did. So we went from an environment where safety was a given. You can leave your front door open. You can leave your car door open. Yes, there was petty crime around Prince George. I mean, Prince George at the time was about 90,000 people. There was the odd murder from, it was gangsters or druggies taking each other out. Just from an environment where ideal for kids. I mean, I'm sure you experienced the same in Portugal. There's no fences around the front yard. It's just lawn after lawn after lawn. You walk across to your neighbor. I mean, his lawn is your lawn. There's no division. Sure, the back is divided, and that's purely because you just want a little bit of privacy. And you get to know your neighbors well. I mean, when we left Prince George, they had a street party for us. I've never experienced something like that. I know Joburg has street parties. So we went from an environment very safe, and we came into South Africa, Cape Town, where we got put up very fortunate. Man, it's one of the better experiences I've had in Cape Town. We got put up in Victoria Road. If you know Cape Town, well, it's in Camps Bay. It's probably one of the most beautiful areas for sunsets. The most stunning sunsets you can have. So we were put up there for 6 weeks, and I'd drive over from Camps Bay over Cliff Neck into the office in the CBD in Cape Town, and there were still street vendors, newspaper vendors holding up, the headlines. And every morning I'd read XYZ murdered, X murdered, Y murdered. And it knocked me. And Cathy, again, no job, came back to no job. And the three young girls sitting in an apartment, and you suddenly, why are you doing this? This is crazy. Why am I wanting to live in that environment? But can I tell you, it's similar to when we moved to Canada. It took us literally 3 months to reintegrate. So Canada taught us how to integrate into a new society. That hairy experience of arriving in that dark, dingy motel, A month later, we had our own apartment or house. We'd organized ourselves, set ourselves up in this rental. Really, I love gardening. I said to my landlord, I want to fix your garden up here. I mean, you could see it used to be something special. His wife used to own the house before they married and redid the garden and really became part of that community. And similarly in Cape Town, once we had got a house, which is actually where we're doing this podcast from, we've been here 20 years. Once we'd got the house, man, we reintegrated quickly. We're in a cul-de-sac. I said to Cathy, we've got to have a street party. We still haven't, but we've got to know our neighbors very well. And reintegrated. And you get used to the fact that you've got to be different here. You've got to lock the house. I don't want to share too much, but I mean, we've got burglar bars, but it's the bare minimum.
Yeah,
we still try and live very much the way we lived in Canada. And one thing I want to say and I preach it often to friends and whoever I can. The one criminal in Cape Town, there's one criminal in our community, and 99 of us are sitting in our houses whilst we allow that criminal to take ownership of our street. Let the 99 of us, this is my learning from Canada, go and be on the street and be friendly and committed and connected. And that one person won't want to be in our community. They'll go somewhere else. I don't wish that they go somewhere else, because something else I'm very passionate about is transforming the economy in South Africa. We've transformed we now are democratic, so we've transformed the political thing, but it hasn't changed life for the majority of South Africans. And I want to I know I can't do it, but I'm part of an organization which, in a very small way, is starting to transform the economy. And that for me is so key, because as soon as we get to a very strong middle class society, then democracy will truly take hold here. We'll truly see the fruits of the labor of not only the people from the past who were brave enough, which included you and I, to actually say, let's become democratic, but the fruits of those over the last 30 years who have tried to make South Africa something better. I know we've got challenges here, but I can tell you the majority are trying to make it better. And we will get there.
I think that's very true. You obviously know about the Lekker network.
Yes. I've been wanted to be part of it, and I see you are.
I am. You should really join. I mean,
I'm connected with all the key guys. So I'm just,
yeah.
I've been waiting. I mean, they invite me to events or whatever.
But I did an interview with Nick Latouf, who's the founder.
Yeah.
In December, you can listen to that. The one thing that comes through in every discussion with those guys, they are so positive about South Africa, and they live all over the world, but they're trying to make a difference. And I think that's a very positive thing. So you'll do well to join them. I think it's very good.
No, as I said, I've connected with a few of them, and for me, life is about relationships. And if you got similarities, I mean, we're all different, but if you got similar values, and I've seen that. John Watson, connected with him, who's the local coordinator in the West Cape. Renier, I've meet with John from time to time. Renier Lombard, I haven't met in person, but I've met online several times or engaged several times, seen Nick at Lekker Network events. We actually in the process through what I'm trying to do, I'm part of a foundation called the Solulo Foundation. So a business called Solulo Technology started in the townships by a very good friend of mine, Deloitte Johannesburg, from the Eastern Cape as well, Kumani, or formerly Queenstown. Deloitte, has built this highly successful business. He's received accolades across the world, World Economic Forum, Schwab Foundation, Africa Forward he's leading now. He started a business with his brother and another friend 20 years ago called Solulo Technologies. And then 3 years ago, I decided to start a foundation. And, the foundation, I had the honor and privilege being invited to be a director of the foundation. It's a great board. so diverse, age, color, male, female, just one of the best directors or boards I've been on. But our whole purpose is to support township and rural entrepreneurs to get them to succeed. And they're going to grow the economy for us. They're going to transform it for us. And so I actually said at our most recent network, the Lekker network, the 500 plus and 30,000 followers are sitting in countries where I know what it means. If I earn, X amount of dollars, to give away $10 a month, which is 200 Rand, is not a much. But can I tell you, if all 500 Lekker network members or the 30,000 followers, but just the 500 each gave $10 or £10 a month, the impact it will have is huge. And I know the Lekker network is looking to have impact back in South Africa. And money is not always the solution, but if you funnel that into the right organizations like Solulo Foundation, then the potential is huge. So we've reached out, not to Rainier or John yet, although my plan is to reach out to John, but we've reached out to one of my other colleagues, I'm an advisory board member to Solulo Technologies. So one of my fellow advisory members, we've reached out to her. She's part of the Lekker network, and we've asked her to actually engage Rainier.
Okay.
So
there's a good plan.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's amazing how time flies when you're having fun. Just getting to the end and maybe asking you on reflection, if you think back of, your career, you use the word bittersweet. In terms of how things have panned out for you, would you have done it differently?
Not at all. Not at all. People talk about regrets in life. I have no regret. I possibly do have one, but I have no major regrets. Life is about experience, and it's about experiencing experiences. That's why when you said, Monty, would you like to be part of the podcast? Whenever I get asked, for a meeting or engagement, I'm always keen, even if my time's limited. And the reason I say that, because you never know. I never know what comes out of this, Jan. Not the podcast, but just meeting you. I mean, you and I could become the best of mates out of this. And that for me is what life is about. It's about sitting down, sharing experiences. It's about seeing how we can help each other. I mean, the Lekker network, one of the guys, Pierre Duplessis, who you might know, Pierre came and met with me. I mean, he contacted me, he said, Monty, I need to meet with you. And then when we met, there's the Lekker network thing. How can I help you? And he said to me at the end, how can I help you? And I wasn't expecting for help. I was just wanted to connect with someone, and I thought that's why he's connecting with me. He said, how can I help you? And I didn't know how to answer him. I was like, this was lekker, just getting to know you and know what you're up to. And but life is about helping each other, hey? It is. That's what I love about the Lekker network. You're right that I should become a member. I'm just so committed to different, like the Solulo Foundation. I'm part of a Christian business leaders forum. All of these, and I feel that I'm in the right place. And I feel the people who are in the Lekker network are there for a good reason. But I love the Lekker network, so I will become part of it sometime at some point in time. I definitely want to. Yeah, enjoy the journey, and sometimes the journey, instead of going through Kimberley, goes Pofadder way, and sometimes it goes through some of the strangest places. But can I tell you, when you arrive in Pofadder, there's something exciting to do there, something you didn't expect. So, yeah.
But last question, you've already said your daughter's gone to London. What would you advise them, the younger ones now, if they come to you and they say, Dad, I want to go, what would you say to them?
Well, that's that elder daughter who went for the gap year. She then went back to Ape and Bordeaux, of all places. So I was quite chuffed, because I said, now you know something. When the 2023 World Cup is on, the Boxer got a game in Bordeaux. I want to go and stay with it. Unfortunately, we didn't make it over. Just the cost was way too much. But so she was there for about 6 weeks. So you could argue that's short. And then her and her boyfriend, she was still on ComServe when he's a CA as well, and he moved over to the UK to go and work there. And she then followed just over a year later. And so Cathy and I saw the same thing unfolding. My eldest daughter is an occupational therapist. So a CA and occupational therapist going overseas, we know where this is potentially going.
Seen the movie.
Yeah, but you should maybe interview Reese and Tessa. They were there Reese was there for 2.5 years. Tessa was there for a year and a half. So she stayed a little bit longer than him. He came back in May last year. And he just said, London has changed. It's not what they experienced, after leaving school and doing university and holidays he had done. His brother is still in the UK with his wife. They're happily living there. But Reese said, look, I need to get back to South Africa. Tessa still had a contract, about a 6-month contract to go in London. So she stayed a little bit longer, but still left a little bit earlier than planned. They're both happily back in South Africa, loving it back here, love Cape Town, loved their time in London, but they said London has changed. It's, if they could have lived outside of London, it would have been a different story. They possibly would have stayed. Now, the interesting aspect, Jan, is a lot of friends, parents in general, would say, why are your kids coming back? I think we as parents do have a responsibility to equip our children to make a decision where they want to live. Our kids have all got Canadian passports. It's opened up their opportunities for the rest of their lives. My eldest daughter traveled on a Canadian passport overseas and cost her nothing to go into most European countries. Unfortunately, her boyfriend couldn't because he'd have to get a visa to get into those on a South African passport. She's an adventurous child. The other two would like to go overseas. They're both still studying, but they'd love to do a master's or a PhD overseas. They've looked into it. The opportunities have arisen. We're supportive of it because having lived overseas, it's scary, but you can do it. This is a very small world. And when you have a look at the 4 people, including proud Canadian, who was part of the trip to Mars. I think they might have landed today or they're landing tomorrow back on Earth. I mean, when you look at what they saw, this world is even smaller. Kids must go and enjoy themselves. And if they live overseas, that's fine. I fully support them because it's each individual's choice. Some of us are coming back to South Africa. My brother sent me something the other day to say that a lot of South Africans are immigrating, coming back from Canada, Australia, and the UK, more than you can ever believe. And that's great. I think it's good. This world's open to live wherever you like. So enjoy it.
Absolutely. It's not for me to judge. So every person does what's right for him at that point. And I think that's the way to look at it,
All I ask is those South Africans leaving South Africa after a bad experience, I really feel for you. But can I ask, please don't crash us overseas. We all have bad incidents. The only time our house has ever been broken into was in Canada. It was a horrible experience. Not because of Canada. It was a horrible experience when people have walked through your property and, taken stuff. But you know what? Canada has got great memories for me. I mean, and I realize a lot of South Africans have experienced bad things and that's caused them to leave. But I do encourage them to remember that there were good things and there still are good things happening in South Africa. And please just make sure that when you're out there, wear that proud South African flag for us. We need it.
Stay positive.
Exactly.
Quick reminder before we close today. If police clearances, apostille certificates, or any South African documents are still on your list, Apostille sorts it out for you. Visit the link in the description below and see how Apostle can help you on your journey. I must say, I can still talk to you for hours, but
Yeah, no, we must catch up again.
thank you so much for sharing. I mean, it's just such a wonderful perspective, and it's so good to hear that you're happily back in Cape Town. It's funny, though, that not many South Africans return from overseas to Johannesburg. Everyone that I've spoken to that's looking at coming back is coming back to Cape Town. So that says something about Cape Town too. But thank you so much. And to our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might enjoy the conversation. You can find more episodes of the podcast on your favorite platform or visit our website, therelocatedSouthAfrican.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.